Toto Wolff didn't exactly have the easiest start in life, and that's putting it mildly. Born in Vienna in 1972, the guy went through proper hell as a kid that would have broken most people. His dad got diagnosed with brain cancer, and after fighting the illness for a whole decade, the man finally passed away when Toto was just 15 years old. The whole cancer treatment absolutely destroyed the family financially. That's the kind of humiliation that either breaks you completely or turns you into an absolute machine. For Toto, it was definitely the latter. The guy said he wanted to make a better life for himself and did whatever it took to succeed. In his 20s, he competed as an amateur racer, starting in the Austrian Formula Ford series, which is basically where every wannabe F1 driver cuts their teeth. But Toto was smart enough to realize his real talent wasn't behind the wheel, it was in spotting opportunities. While he was still racing, he started up these venture capital firms called March 15 and March 16 in the late 90s. These companies made some proper good money in the tech sector during the dot-com boom, with deals that netted millions in profits from investments in internet startups and telecommunications companies. By his early 30s, Toto had become this savvy investor who could spot undervalued assets from miles away. In 2009, Toto made his first big F1 move, and it was a solid calculated risk. He bought a 16.3% stake in Williams Racing for what was probably several million quid, though the exact figure was never disclosed. Now, Williams at the time was basically this sleeping giant that had seen better days. They'd won 9 Constructors Championships between 1980 and 1997, and were this legendary team that had employed drivers like Nigel Mansell, Damon Hill, and Jacques Villeneuve. But they hadn't won a race since Juan Pablo Montoya's victory at the 2004 Brazilian Grand Prix. 5 years without a victory for a team that used to dominate the sport. Toto became the first outside investor in what had always been a family-run team. Joining the Williams board, he immediately started pushing for changes. He helped them float a portion of their shares on the stock exchange in 2011, raising approximately £20 million and giving the team access to public markets for the first time. He was there when Williams finally broke their drought with Pastor Maldonado's upset victory at the 2012 Spanish Grand Prix. First win in 8 years, that was, and you could see the relief on everyone's faces. By the time Toto had worked his way up to executive director at Williams, his success at Williams caught the attention of bigger fish, and by late 2012, Mercedes-Benz came calling. They'd bought the championship-winning Brawn GP team in 2009 for a reported €112 million and returned to F1 as a factory outfit. When Mercedes approached Toto in late 2012, it put him in a right pickle. He was deeply invested in Williams, both financially and emotionally, owning a proper chunk of the team and having worked his ass off to help turn them around. But Mercedes' offer was mental. They wanted him to basically run their entire F1 operation with full authority over sporting and business decisions. What made the offer even more compelling was Mercedes' potential. They had unlimited resources from Daimler, the parent company, with annual revenues exceeding €100 billion, and were clearly serious about winning championships. The problem was, they were struggling to put all the pieces together, despite hiring top talent like Ross Brawn and having state-of-the-art facilities. When Toto officially joined Mercedes in January 2013, he didn't just get a new job title. The guy bought a 30% ownership stake in the Mercedes F1 operation for around £40 million. Mercedes also bought in Niki Lauda as non-executive chairman around the same time, paying the 3-time world champion a reported €5 million for his services. This created quite the dynamic duo. The problem was, Ross Brawn was still there as team principal, and he wasn't exactly thrilled about the new power structure. Things got properly messy when Toto and Lauda started recruiting top talent like Paddy Lowe from McLaren behind Ross's back. Lowe was McLaren's executive technical director and had been instrumental in their championship successes with Lewis Hamilton. By the end of 2013, the situation had become untenable, and Ross decided he'd had enough. He chose to leave rather than continue in what had become a toxic environment. With Ross out of the picture, Toto became team principal and CEO in 2014. One of his first major calls was fully backing Lewis Hamilton as the new face of the team, while seven-time champion Michael Schumacher finally retired after an underwhelming three-year comeback. Bringing Hamilton from McLaren cost Mercedes a reported $100 million over 3 years. But Toto understood that having a proven champion was essential for their championship ambitions.
And there are many people in Brackley and in Brixworth in Stuttgart who worked for that. You don't see that because it's not on the race weekend.
In 2014, Formula One introduced these absolutely massive new engine regulations, switching from naturally aspirated 2.4-litre V8s to complex 1.6-litre V6 turbo hybrid power units with energy recovery systems. This completely reset the competitive order and gave teams a chance to start fresh with revolutionary technology. Toto and Mercedes had positioned themselves perfectly to capitalize on this opportunity. Their engineering group at Brixworth had been developing advanced hybrid technology for years, investing over €100 million in research and development before the regulations even came into effect. When the new rules arrived, they were miles ahead of everyone else. The result was a complete and utter demolition job in 2014. Mercedes won 16 out of 19 races that season, with Lewis Hamilton taking his second world title and the team securing their first Constructors Championship since returning to F1. But that was just the beginning of what became the most dominant run in F1 history. From 2014 to 2021, Mercedes won 8 consecutive Constructors' Championships, which is absolutely mental when you think about it. Hamilton and Rosberg delivered 7 drivers' titles between them during that period, with Hamilton claiming 6 and Rosberg taking 1 in 2016 before shocking everyone by retiring immediately. During the peak years from 2014 to 2020, Mercedes won 101 out of 141 races. That's a win rate of over 71%. They scored 11 1-2 finishes in 2014 alone and regularly lapped half the field during their most dominant periods. The 2016 season was particularly brutal for the competition. Mercedes won 19 out of 21 races that year, with Hamilton and Rosberg basically having their own private championship fight while everyone else was racing for third place. The team grew massively under Toto's leadership. When Mercedes returned to F1 in 2010, they had about 500 to 600 staff split between the Brackley chassis facility and Brixworth engine plant. By 2022, that number had roughly doubled to around 1,300 employees. While the racing's success grabbed all the headlines, Toto was also completely revolutionizing how Mercedes operated as a business. When he arrived, the team wasn't anywhere near maximizing its revenue potential, despite having one of the strongest brands in motorsport. Toto used the team's on-track success to attract blue-chip sponsors and partners from every sector imaginable. Petronas remained as the title sponsor through a deal worth approximately €70 million annually, providing both funding and technical support with their fuels and lubricants that actually contributed to Mercedes' performance advantage. One absolutely massive deal was bringing in Ineos as a principal partner in 2020. But Toto didn't just secure them as a sponsor, he convinced them to become equity partners. By the end of 2020, Ineos had bought a 1/3 stake in the team equal to Toto's own share and Mercedes-Benz's portion. The deal was worth hundreds of millions and brought in Sir Jim Ratcliffe, one of the UK's richest individuals with a net worth exceeding £20 billion as a co-owner. By the way, I've made an entire video on how F1 teams make money. You should check it out. And if you made it this far into the video, don't forget to subscribe. We're trying to get to 50,000 subscribers by the end of 2025. Subscribe! Mercedes' biggest rival during their dominant years was Red Bull Racing, and the personal battles between Toto and Christian Horner became absolutely legendary. The rivalry reached fever pitch during the 2021 season, which became one of the most controversial in F1 history. Hamilton and Verstappen were trading wins all year long, with the lead in both championships changing hands multiple times. They entered the final race in Abu Dhabi, tied on 369.5 points each for the Drivers' Championship. Winner takes all. Verstappen managed to pass Hamilton on the final lap to win the race and steal the championship right from under Mercedes' noses. The introduction of ground effect regulations in 2022 brought Mercedes' 8-year reign of dominance to a crashing halt in the most brutal way imaginable. For the first time since taking over in 2013, Toto faced the monumental challenge of leading a team that had gone from absolute kings to struggling just to score podiums. The W13 car was an absolute disaster from day one. Mercedes' unique zero side pod concept looked revolutionary in photos, but proved to be fundamentally flawed on track. The car suffered from severe porpoising, violent bouncing caused by aerodynamic instability that was so bad it left Lewis Hamilton barely able to get out of his car after some races.
You've got a problem, change your car.
Then you change your car because Checo has been saying the car is fast.
No,
Your driver has been going out.
Speak to my drivers.
The team finished third in the Constructors Championship with just one victory. George Russell's emotional win in Brazil that came more from strategy and luck than raw pace. For a team accustomed to winning 15-plus races per season, managing just one victory felt like complete failure. Toto later admitted that 2022 was the toughest year of his Mercedes tenure. 12 months ago, we didn't understand what the problem was. It was a bitter surprise to find ourselves struggling with a car that did not generate performance, he said. Here's the mental bit though. Russell's victory in Brazil at the end of 2022, combined with strong performances in the final races, convinced Mercedes they were on the right track. Toto called it the perfect storm, a late-season upturn that masked the fundamental problems with their design philosophy. So, Mercedes doubled down on the zero side pod concept for 2023, convinced they could make it work. Lewis Hamilton repeatedly warned the team that the design was wrong, telling engineers exactly what needed to change. But the engineers didn't listen. The 2023 season opener in Bahrain was a rude awakening. Mercedes qualified 0.6 seconds off the pace, behind not just Red Bull, but also Aston Martin, a team that bought many parts from Mercedes but had adopted Red Bull's aerodynamic philosophy. By April 2023, it was clear that Mercedes needed drastic action. In a move that showed both Toto's pragmatism and his willingness to admit mistakes, he orchestrated the return of James Allison as technical director. Mike Elliott, who'd taken over from Allison in 2021, essentially fired himself. Elliott conducted an internal review and concluded he wasn't the right person for the job. The technical reshuffle was crucial for team morale. Midway through 2023, Mercedes finally abandoned their zero side pod concept entirely. The team introduced a completely new aerodynamic package that looked much more conventional, admitting that their unique approach had been fundamentally flawed. Lewis Hamilton was vindicated. Everything he'd warned about proved correct. But by then, it was too late to salvage 2023. Hamilton ended the year winless for the first time since 2022, a streak that would extend well into 2024. Ironically, Mercedes' worst sporting period coincided with their best financial performance. The cost cap regulations that arrived in 2021 actually helped Mercedes' bottom line, as Toto had predicted. When Toto bought into Mercedes in 2013, the entire F1 operation was valued at around $165 million. Fast forward a decade, and by 2023, Forbes estimated the Mercedes F1 team was worth approximately $3.8 billion. That's not just growth, that's an explosion in value that you rarely see outside of tech startups during a bubble. Toto's personal net worth reflects this boom in a big way. His one-third share in the team is now worth about $1.8 billion, making him F1's first billionaire team principal. The team's operational revenues tell an equally impressive story. In 2013, Mercedes F1 was bringing in £120 million annually from prize money, sponsorship, and commercial rights. By 2022, that figure had quadrupled to around £475 million. But the real explosion came in 2024 when Mercedes GP's income hit £636 million, with a record net profit of £120.3 million. What makes those 2024 numbers even more impressive is that they were achieved under F1's cost cap, which limits how much teams can spend on racing activities to around $135 million annually. Most people thought the cost cap would hurt big teams like Mercedes, but Toto found ways to maintain competitiveness while actually increasing profitability. In early 2025, Mercedes paid out a massive £125 million dividend to shareholders based on the strong 2024 financial results. Toto's share of that payout alone was probably around £40 million.
The man himself.
The team's first victory since 2022 finally came at the 2024 British Grand Prix, with Lewis Hamilton breaking a painful drought that had lasted nearly 3 years. But even that success felt different. It was earned through strategy and tyre management rather than having the fastest car. More importantly, Lewis Hamilton was already planning on leaving for Ferrari next season, and nothing could really stop him. The bombshell had actually dropped months earlier, in February 2024, when Hamilton shocked the F1 world by announcing his move to Ferrari. The timing was absolutely mental. Just 6 months after signing a 2-year extension with Mercedes, Hamilton activated a break clause to join the sport's most famous team. Toto found out in the most awkward way possible. Hamilton broke the news over breakfast at Toto's house in Oxford, just 36 hours before the announcement went public. That moment was terrifying for Hamilton, who admitted the conversation was one of the most difficult of his career. But the brutal truth was that Toto had been contemplating Hamilton's shelf life at 39 years old. Contract negotiations between the two had always been difficult because of their close personal relationship. They eventually had to outsource the process to avoid the awkwardness. Hamilton leaving on his own terms saved Toto from having to make what he called the toughest call of my career. But the timing absolutely screwed Mercedes. Hamilton's announcement came just weeks after top drivers like Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris had signed new contracts with their teams, leaving Mercedes with no options. Ultimately, Toto handled the Hamilton departure with charismatic pragmatism. George Russell's role became crucial during this period. As the younger driver less attached to the dominant years, he provided stability and optimism, while Hamilton struggled with the uncompetitive cars. Russell's consistent point scoring kept Mercedes in Constructors Championship contention even when wins were impossible. As of 2025, Mercedes' recovery remains incomplete. They've avoided the complete collapse that some predicted, but haven't returned to consistent race-winning form. The team sits firmly in the best of the rest category behind McLaren and Red Bull. This season brought this absolutely mental driver market saga that dominated headlines for months. Verstappen rumours started flying, and things got properly mental. George Russell made this cryptic comment during pre-season testing about ongoing talks between Mercedes and a certain top driver affecting his own contract negotiations. Things reached peak madness in July 2025 when yacht and private jet tracking data suggested Verstappen and Toto were both in Sardinia at the same time during the summer break. But then reality set in, and Verstappen himself broke his silence at the Hungarian Grand Prix. The guy basically told everyone to shut up, saying, "It's time to basically stop all the rumours," and confirmed he was staying with Red Bull for 2026 and beyond. Toto, meanwhile, indicated he'd prefer to retain his current lineup of Russell and Antonelli for 2026. This came after Mercedes saw an uptick in form and probably after realising just how difficult and expensive it would be to actually get Verstappen away from Red Bull. Still, I'm fascinated by the idea of Max potentially jumping ship from Red Bull to Mercedes. I mean, I dismissed it as absolutely insane just a couple of months ago. But with Horner gone, would Toto be able to lure Max to Mercedes? I mean, he's got time. Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe.